They thought humans were too primitive for galactic warfare until one old drill sergeant broke every record in their elite assessment. No enhancements, no advanced tech, just grit, scars, and a bad attitude. Now the galaxy's toughest recruits are learning a brutal truth. Earth doesn't make soldiers. It forges survivors. Before we dive into the story of the most dangerous human the galaxy has ever underestimated, make sure to hit that subscribe button, smash the like, and turn on notifications so you never miss a story where humanity shows exactly why you don't mess with Earth. The rain didn't fall. It hammered. Relentless sheets of cold water slammed into the training grounds, turning the Earth into a gluey bog that clung to the boots of 23 soaked cadets and one poor soul already regretting his life decisions. They stood frozen in place, shoulders stiff, expressions blank. The 1,000-yard stare not earned in war but forged in the furnace of humiliation. What kind of cosmic joke was that disgrace of a drill? Bellowed Master Instructor Garan Cade, circling the group like a hawk that had learned how to swear. His voice sliced through the storm. He looked like a war monument come to life, a craggy face twisted into something between fury and exhaustion, a walking relic of 4 decades spent turning soft humans into hardened fighters. At 58, Cade was a relic of battles no one remembered, a latticework of old wounds. A shrapnel line across his leg from the siege of Maravan, fire scars licking up one arm from the desalination riots, and eyes like stone that had seen too much to care anymore. I've seen corpses dance with more energy. I've seen drunk squirrels sprint straighter lines, he barked, now inches away from a visibly shaking recruit whose rifle was sagging like his spirit. Cade's nose nearly touched the kid's. Am I boring you, Cupcake? Is my training cutting into your nap time? No, instructor, the cadet shouted, snapping upright, his voice cracking like glass under pressure. Then why the hell are you standing like a tourist at a theme park? Cade hissed. He leaned in closer, his breath hot despite the rain. Pull that spine straight before I yank it out and plant it like a flag. The recruit went rigid, sheer terror carved into every twitch of his muscles. Cade turned, now addressing all of them. His voice didn't need volume. It had gravity. You think this is tough? He growled. This is nothing. This is preschool. Real hard is holding your best friend's guts in your hands while you're pinned down from 3 directions in a dirt hole that doesn't exist on a map. He stalked past them slowly, scanning each soaked face like a jeweler examining flawed stones. He'd been doing this longer than most of their parents had been alive. Pain, he said, pausing to glare at the slumped figure, is just your weakness escaping. And you, my friend, are very generous with your weakness. He jabbed a muddy finger at the boy. But don't worry, I'm here to fix you. One way or another, by the end of this, you'll either walk out a soldier or not at all. There's no third door. 2 hours later, what remained of the group slogged toward the barracks. Every step an argument with gravity. Covered in mud, sweat, and broken pride, they looked less like trainees and more like survivors of a failed pilgrimage. Down the hill, Chief Marshal Harlan Voss approached, umbrella useless against the deluge. Still tearing them apart before you glue them back together. Garan? Cade grunted, dragging a soaked towel across his lined face. Someone's got to do it. These kids think Battle Zone 12 counts as combat experience. Voss smirked. General Kalen wants a word. Says it's urgent. Urgent. Cade muttered, like the word had betrayed him. Urgent enough to skip chow? Immediate. Cade let out a sigh, long and heavy, like a man who'd learned long ago that immediate in military terms usually meant either bureaucratic nonsense or an incoming storm. General Adrian Kalen was one of the very few commanders Cade hadn't yet cussed out or ignored. They bled together in the wastelands of Sindar Province. Where Kalen earned a reputation few officers had anymore, a leader who actually led. He actually cared. Commander Kalen wasn't just another desk-bound officer with medals polished by assistants. The photos on his wall weren't stage hero shots. They mirrored the ones in Cade's own hall of scars, Graduates molded into warriors, some of whom had become legends, others who had never made a home. "Sit down, Garan," Kalen said, gesturing to the weather chair across from him. "How's the fresh meat looking?" "Greener than algae on a Martian lake," Cade replied. "But they'll either adapt or evaporate. That's how it works." Kalen nodded, then pushed a thin folder across the desk. "That's actually what I wanted to discuss." Cade raised an eyebrow. He'd seen that kind of folder too many times before, the kind that always led to unpaid overtime and life-or-death adventures. "You've been following the chatter about our new neighbors out there?" Cade snorted. "Enough to know they think we're cave dwellers who stumbled onto a radio signal and followed it into space." "They're not entirely wrong," Kalen admitted. "We're the rookies in a very old league. But High Command's working overtime to shift that narrative." Cade didn't like the way this was going. In his experience, when generals got all philosophical, it usually meant someone was about to be volunteered without consent. "Enter the Unified Stellar Readiness Accord," Kalen said, opening the folder. "Think of it as intergalactic NATO. They've invited Earth to participate in their first standardized combat performance trial. Every species sends a rep." "And let me guess," Cade muttered, already dreading the answer. "They picked you." Cade stared at the man across the table. "With all due respect, this is nonsense. I'm 6 months from hanging up the boots. Send some hyper-trained commando from Black Echo or Wolf Squad." "That's just it," Kalen said, shaking his head. "They didn't want a super soldier. They asked for a median human military candidate. Not elite, just standard issue. They want a control sample." They locked eyes, and for a moment, both men exploded into laughter. "Average." Cade wiped his face. "Sweet stars, me." But Kalen wasn't smiling anymore. "This matters, Garan. Earth's standing in the Accord depends on how we perform. And frankly, you're the only one I trust to walk into an alien crucible and come out with our flag still intact." "Translation," Cade said deadpan, "I'm expendable." "No," Kalen said firmly. "You're battle-tested in ways most men never live long enough to be. And you've spent your life training others to survive. That makes you essential." He leaned forward. "I wouldn't ask if I didn't believe it." Cade exhaled slowly. 35 years of war, drills, and funerals pressed down on his shoulders like a mountain that refused to crumble. "When do I leave?" 3 days later, Cade stood in the dim quarters he'd called home for years, tossing bare necessities into a worn duffel bag. The room was sterile except for one wall, a line of framed photographs frozen in time. Recruits turned warriors, caught mid-smile on graduation day. One photo sat apart from the rest. Older, softer, a woman with dark hair and bright, mischievous eyes. Cade paused, fingers brushing the glass like it might warm him. "Some send-off, huh, Lyra?" he murmured to the image of his late wife. "Guess I'm Earth's test subject for the alien circus." His quiet reflection was cut short as a sharp knock cut through the quiet. "Come in," Cade barked. A jittery young soldier stepped inside, barely concealing his nerves. "Your transport is ready, instructor." Cade gave a curt nod, zipping up his duffel. Before slinging it over his shoulder, he reached for a familiar relic mounted on the wall, a battle-worn combat blade, edges dull by time but sharpened by memory. The old Fong steel knife had walked with him through 2 major conflicts and more back-alley shootouts than he cared to catalog. The interstellar types didn't carry blades, but a man should never leave without a piece of his past. The private's eyes widened at the sight of the legendary Garan, Cade casually slipping the blade into his belt like he was prepping for a raid instead of a diplomatic mission. "Relax, soldier," Cade muttered, catching the look. "I'm not planning to gut anyone." He hoisted the bag onto his back. "Unless someone really earns it." The transport wasn't like any military craft Cade had ever flown. No roar of thrusters. No rattle of bolts. It glided, sleek and silent, unnervingly elegant. The kind of movement that made his stomach perform gymnastics his body had long forgotten. "First trip in no grav?" asked the pilot, a lieutenant barely old enough to shave. His fresh face made Cade feel like a fossil. What gave me away? Cade growled, gripping the safety harness with the desperation of a drowning man. The creative vocabulary, sir, I'm fairly certain zero-G nut basket juggling, is a phrase that'll live forever in the logs. Cade would have flipped him the bird if his fingers hadn't been welded to the straps. For Queasy, reality-defying hours later, the shuttle latched onto an enormous structure hovering in orbit, the Interstellar Defense Evaluation Nexus. As the artificial gravity settled back into place, Cade resisted the primal urge to kiss the deck beneath his boots. Waiting just beyond the docking seal was a welcoming committee, if welcome meant deeply unsettling. An array of beings stood like a gallery of the galaxy's strangest artwork. Cade's brow furrowed. What in the abyss are those? Walking ferns? He muttered as a collection of lanky, plant-like organisms shuffled by, their limbs too numerous and movements unervingly fluid. The young pilot shot him a warning glance. Sergeant, remember, you're Earth's representative. Try diplomacy. I'm a soldier, Cade growled. If they wanted polite, they should have sent a politician. While the lieutenant vanished into a maze of bureaucratic checkpoints, Cade stood his ground until approached by something even stranger, a towering, skeletal being with pale skin stretched tight over an elongated frame. Its eyelids blinked one at a time, independently, like a chameleon surveying prey. Instructor Garan Cadatera, said a voice, filtered through a translator node embedded near its throat. The accent was clipped, the words slightly delayed, as if time traveled differently for the creature. That's me, Cade replied, doing his best not to stare at the alien's mouth, which twisted and bent in deeply unnatural ways every time it spoke. I am Senior Facilitator Elvon of the AL. The alien performed a motion that might have been a bow, or maybe a puppet collapsing mid-performance. I will be managing your assimilation into the evaluation directive. Cade straightened instinctively, feet shoulder-width apart, hands clasped behind him, the reflex of a man who'd lived too long in parade rest. Then, take point, he said evenly. And so they walked. Elvon's voice shifted into something dangerously close to a lecture, precise practice, and laced with just a hint of superiority. The Interstellar Defense Evaluation is intended to establish a unified metric for combat preparedness across all member civilizations, he said, leading Cade through a wide corridor lined with blinking glyphs. It is exceedingly rare for a pre-span civilization, such as yours, to be included at this stage of development. We may be new to space, Cade replied, voice dry as cracked stone, but we've been smashing each other's skulls and since before we invented shoes. Elvon's mouth, or what passed for one, twitched in a way that made Cade unsure if he'd cause offense or laughter. Yes, your species' remarkable aptitude for violence has been catalogued in early behavioral analysis. They entered a vaulted chamber that looked part war room, part alien zoo. Representatives from at least a dozen species were scattered throughout. Some looked born for war. A towering brute with slate-colored skin and fists like siege hammers, still like a statue of wrath in the corner. Others moved like whispers. A feline-like creature with slitted pupils and a liquid grace that screamed predator. These are your co-assessees. Elvon gestured. You will be evaluated alongside them. However, assessment matrices will be adjusted to account for species-specific physiology. Cade felt it immediately, the weight of a dozen eyes studying him like he was a strange new exhibit at a museum. Judging, measuring, underwhelmed. Let me guess, Cade muttered. They're wondering why you brought an unevolved dirt ape to the grown-up table. Elvon's head tilted at an unnatural angle that made Cade's spine ache just watching. Your insight is surprising. I've spent most of my life staring down men who wanted me dead, Cade said flatly. Aliens ain't that much harder to read. The briefing that followed felt like a remedial course designed for slow learners. Elvon's tone didn't help. It had the slow, deliberate cadence of someone explaining fire to a caveman. The trial would span 72 Earth Standard Hours. No breaks. No sleep cycles. Vital signs would be monitored in real time to prevent permanent injury, but only just. Assessments would cover endurance, combat aptitude, tactical decision-making, and psychological integrity under pressure. As the information droned on, Cade kept his focus on the others. The slate-skinned giant was named Growlithe of Vrax's Enclave. His mere presence radiated challenge. The cat-like warrior, Slith, a Tenari, studied the room with razor-sharp precision. Nothing escaped her gaze. You appear distracted, Earthborn. Elvon's voice interrupted Cade's surveillance. Just wondering when the training wheels come off, Cade said. This still feels like freshman orientation. Something like a chuckle rippled through a few of the alien delegates. Others, including Elvon, seemed less amused. I assure you, instructed Cade. Elvon said stiffly, these trials represent the harshest conditions our cross-species tacticians were permitted to design under interstellar law. If you say so, Cade shrugged, unimpressed. The tour didn't improve his opinion. The environments were flashy, sure, but they reminded him of Earth-based training yards dressed in fancier skins. The combat simulation chamber looked like a high-end gun range fused with a martial arts dojo. This graviton vault simulates up to triple your native gravity, Elvon announced, motioning toward a reinforced dome studded with ominous machinery. Looks easier. Easier than the crawl courses at Stonewatch Base, Cade muttered, smirking at the way Elvon's eye stalks twitched in confusion. Apparently, sarcasm didn't translate well into the elf physiology. By the time they arrived at his designated living quarters, Cade had thoroughly scrambled the aliens' expectations. His complete lack of awe seemed to short-circuit Elvon's protocol-driven mind. The assessment initiates at Cycle Mark 0600, Station Standard, Elvon said, gesturing to a slim metal band now affixed to Cade's wrist. Your biometric monitor will activate automatically. Copy that, Cade said, twisting the band like he might crush it. He glanced around his temporary cell. A bunk, a sink, a mirror, and nothing else. Felt like home. Elvon hesitated at the door. Instructor Cade, I feel compelled to inform you. The evaluation has a failure threshold of 40%. Disqualification is common. There is no dishonor in hell. I lose more than that in week 1 of boot camp. Cade cut in. Save the concern, administrator. Tomorrow is going to be a rough ride for everyone. That evening, the communal hall buzzed with tension. Cade wasn't looking for friends, just intel. He grabbed a ration pouch from the dispenser, a tasteless gray sludge that managed to taste both burnt and metallic, then planted himself at the edge of the room. He watched. The Vrax Titan, Growlithe, was holding an audience, regaling a semicircle of aliens with tales of glorious bloodshed. His voice carried like a cathedral bell. The Tenari, Slith, sat apart, alone, her eyes ever calculating. The rest formed uneasy clusters, some nervous, others pretending they weren't. You are the Terran? Came a voice beside him. A broad, barrel-shaped alien stood nearby, crimson-skinned, armed like an insect, and sporting for slow-blinking eyes. That's me, Cade said, chewing the tasteless gel with a grimace. I am Darn the Dakari, the alien said. Your combat designation? Cade nearly choked from trying not to laugh. Drill master. I train soldiers. Darn's eyes blinked in sequence. You are a teacher, not a fighter? I was a fighter, Cade said casually. Now I build fighters. Been doing it for 3.5 decades. Their conversation drew attention. Growlithe's bulk moved across the hall, shadowing the table with his monstrous size. The human educates larvae, Growlithe boomed. The translator struggled to keep up. Sending him must be a calculated insult. The GGF must hold Earth in contempt. Cade kept eating, entirely unbothered. Believe what you want, big guy. You show no fear of the trial? Darn asked, leaning closer. His tone wasn't mocking, it was curiosity. Should I? Cade asked. Many fail, Darn said. Some die, even with safeguards in place. Cade finished his pack and tossed a wrapper aside. Let me ask something. How many of you have seen real combat? I'm not talking drills, not simulations. I mean death knocking on your door. The silence said everything. Cade stood, his joints protesting the station's weird gravity curve. He scanned the room. Yeah, thought so. He turned to leave, but Growlick's bulk shifted again, stepping into his path. The Vrax warrior's voice rumbled low. Your kind knows nothing of, you know nothing of true war, the Vrax warrior growled. The Groth had been forged in blood for over 10,000 cycles. Cade looked up, unshaken. His expression won a bored disinterest. The brute size might have intimidated the rest, but it was just noise to him. Congratulations, Cade said flatly. While you were perfecting your war chants, we spent that time inventing new and creative ways to end each other faster. Then, with all the ceremony of brushing off lint, he walked past the stunned Titan, heading toward his quarters. Behind him, the common hall exploded in murmurs. The following morning, an electronic chime blared from the band on Cade's wrist, but he was already awake, having risen over an hour earlier. Decades of discipline didn't care about alien clocks. He'd already run through his morning ritual. Push-ups, crunches, stretches, all modified to fit the cramped dimensions of his unfamiliar quarters. The familiar burn grounded him in the otherwise surreal reality of orbiting inside a galactic testing station. The first challenge of the day was the environmental stress gauntlet, a sequence of pressurized chambers simulating extreme planetary conditions. Participants would have passed through a series of harsh environments: searing heat, polar cold, toxic air, elevated radiation, and finally, a near-vacuum low-oxygen zone. There will be no intermissions. Elvon intoned as sleek-eyed medtechs applied a fresh array of biosensors to each participant. Each chamber is calibrated to press your physiological tolerances to their limits. Failure to exit within the safe threshold will result in disqualification. His voice was the same cold monotone Cade had come to associate with alien administrators, part scientist, part funeral director. Speed is not the metric. Endurance and function under strain will be the key measurements. Cade gave a short nod, studying the door ahead. Reinforced steel alloy, likely pressure sealed. It resembled the kind of blast doors he'd seen in underground weapons labs. Big, silent, and just ominous enough to feel like an invitation to something unpleasant. Just like Fort Blackroot, he muttered, only this time with aliens and a fancier budget. The door hissed open, revealing the thermal inferno chamber. It wasn't heat, it was a punch. The air inside was dry as bone and burned like jet wash. The sensor said 120 degrees Fahrenheit, but it felt like walking into the exhaust of a dying star. The scent of scorched metal clung to every breath. Within seconds, sweat pooled at his brow, then vanished, ripped away by the brutal atmosphere, leaving behind a strange sensation of skin turning to paper. He spotted several non-humanoids flinch, their biology clearly not designed for air brutality. One insectoid competitor immediately began to shudder, his exoskeleton convulsing uncontrollably. Rookies, Cade thought, forcing his own discomfort back behind iron discipline. He resisted the urge to sprint through. Steady rhythm, regulated breathing. Preserve hydration. Don't let panic set in. He clocked the Vrax behemoth, Growlick, trudging through like it was a vacation stroll. Thick skin, Cade figured. Advantage, bulk. Others weren't so lucky. He noted limbs shaking, posture sagging, some blinking erratically behind visor shields. Death Valley laughed harder than this, Cade muttered, half to himself, recalling sunburned drills and blister feet in the Mojave. The memory was oddly comforting. Then came the transition. No warning. One step, and suddenly the heat vanished. He stepped through the thermal divide and into the cryoboreal zone. If the previous room had felt like fire, this one was knives. Cold slammed into his body, like a freight train of ice. It wasn't just cold, it was wrong. Each breath turned to razors in his lungs. His joints locked. Frost immediately crept over his eyebrows, his collar, and even the hairs on his forearms. His fingers screamed. His toes ached. His system rebelled. The deep ache settled into his joints like an old enemy. Slow, sharp, and all too familiar. Instinctively, Cade tucked his chin down, protecting his core temperature. He moved with that stiff, calculated shuffle he remembered from long-ago patrols along the Korean DMZ during blackout winters. Around him, the alien competitors weren't faring as well. A reptilian collapsed outright, its limbs locking in place, tail spasming as it dropped in a frozen heap. Another, fur covered and stout, endured better, but every step looked like agony. Cade pressed forward, focusing on the repetitive crunch of his boots on the frost-laced floor. Don't stop, just keep the blood moving. Keep the rhythm. Beat the cold, one step at a time. Then came the third trial, the toxic chamber. As the airlock hissed open, the stinging chill vanished, replaced by a swamp of thick, choking gases. A green-yellow fog churned like poison soup, laced with veins of vaporous bile. An overhead voice crackled through the speakers, instructing all participants to engage their filtration masks. Cade snapped the apparatus into place. The seal felt too tight, not made for human facial structure. The first breath tasted like rusted machinery. Every inhale a struggle, every exhale resisted by thick valves. Visibility dropped to near zero, just a few feet ahead. Shapes blurred and twisted in the haze. Then someone went down. And another. 2 competitors collapsed almost instantly, overwhelmed before technicians in hazard suits could reach them. Cade spotted Darn, the armored Dakari, stumbling. His chest plate expanded and contracted in rapid gasps. His system was failing. Breathe steady, Cade muttered through the mask's comm link, pausing beside the trembling warrior. In through your intake, slow. Let your core filter do the work. Out through the lower valve. Keep moving, soldier. Don't let them win. He clapped a hand against Darn's armored back. Solid, reassuring. The gesture required no translation. Then he moved on. Coddled space recruits. He thought grimly. Next came the worst, the radiation zone. No heat, no cold, no air thick with venom. Just a silent, sterile gray room. At first, it seemed like a reprieve, until the Geiger counter on Cade's wrist began climbing and the low, predatory hum of unseen emitters filled the air. No visible danger. No way to fight it. Just the unseen crawl of cellular betrayal. Several participants froze. Whether it was fear or some heightened biological sense screaming at them, Cade didn't know. But he understood the primal dread. The invisible killer. His own instincts begged him to retreat. He didn't. He couldn't. He remembered drills at old fallout sites. Scenarios near decommissioned nuclear silos. That slow, buzzing anxiety that gnawed at your thoughts until discipline snuffed it out. See the fear. Name it. Don't feed it. One step at a time. Objective. Reach the other side. He kept his eyes on the door. Red numbers pulsed on his wrist monitor, rising with every breath. Ignore them. Move forward. The final chamber. Hypoxia. The change was instant. The air grew thin, dry, and distant, like breathing on top of Everest with a bag over your head. His lungs cried out for oxygen that no longer existed. Black dots flickered at the edges of his vision, and a sledgehammer throb began behind his eyes. He didn't panic. He slowed. His movements became purposeful. His breathing shifted to the emergency rhythm. Inhale, hold, pressurize, exhale slow. High altitude rules. No room for fear. Inhale deep, hold, exhale sharp. The air barely seemed to help. The room pulsed and swam, a wavering mirage of blurred outlines. Cade's limbs felt like they were made of submerged lead. Every movement a battle against the thickening void. Ahead, he spotted Slith, the Tenari hunter, gliding forward, her movement still graceful but clearly strained. She was feeling it too. Even the hulking Groth, Gralic, lumbered along with a sluggishness that betrayed effort. Power alone wasn't enough here. Cade locked his focus on the glowing rectangle that marked the exit. His boots dragged, knees stiffening, but he kept moving. Every breath, every step was an act of defiance. And then he stumbled through the last airlock. The atmosphere shifted instantly. Oxygen-rich, temperate, clean. He nearly collapsed against the bulkhead, gulping down air like a man who clawed his way out of a grave. Medical personnel descended on him with scanners and oxygen masks. Cade waved them off, one arm braced against the cold metal. Just catching my breath, he managed between gasps. Sweat dripped down his neck, plastering his grizzled hair to his head. Elvon approached, a glowing data tablet clutched in his long fingers. His eye stalks quivered, a twitch that Cade was beginning to recognize as surprise, or maybe frustration. "You are the third individual to complete the environmental trial," the alien announced, "and the only one documented assisting another subject during the toxic phase passage." Cade glanced over his shoulder. Darn, the armored Dakari was just now exiting the chamber, wobbling but standing, alive. "And he drops?" Cade asked, wiping his face with his sleeve. 3 participants required emergency intervention and have been removed from further evaluation," Elvon replied. 17% attrition. Cade nodded. "Better than I figured for this bunch." There was a strange pause. The translator voice on Elvon's collar hesitated, faltered briefly. "Your biological indicators were irregular. All metrics indicate extreme physiological distress, elevated cardiac output, thermal instability, dehydration. Yet your operational capability did not decline as predicted. In short," Elvon continued, "your body registered failure, while your performance did not." Cade cracked his neck and shrugged. Just another Tuesday in hell, administrator. The obligatory medical exam only deepened confusion among the station's physicians. Their scanners showed stress trauma, micro tears in muscles, cortisol levels off the charts, blood viscosity spiking. By all logic, he should have been collapsing. But Cade sat on the exam table, sipping a thick nutrient pack like he was waiting for a bus. One of the pale-skinned paramedics stared at the readings, then at Cade. "You are certain you do not wish cellular rejuvenation or recovery enhancement?" Cade chuckled, a low, gravel-rough sound that didn't reassure her. "Save the toys for when I'm actually broken. Document." This was the warm-up round. Back in the communal recovery chamber, everything had changed. Fewer bodies now. The survivors had scattered across the room, rehydrating, bandaging, or silently reflecting. Their eyes tracked Cade as he entered. Some stared in disbelief, others with calculation, a few with respect that hadn't been there before. Even Grallic, the Groth Titan, watched him now with something approaching. Grallic was not pleased. The Vrax warrior's heavy footfalls sent tremors through the floor as he stormed across the recovery bay, his enormous shadow swallowing the light above Cade's chair. "This is not possible," Grallic thundered, his voice rumbling like an avalanche through the translator's bass filters. "Primitive species cannot possess such stamina naturally." Cade didn't even flinch. He took another casual sip of the synthetic citrus sludge he was pretending was a drink. "No upgrades," he said, tapping his own chest. "Just a vintage human model, age 58. Built for misery, tested in worse. We call experience." A new voice slid into the air like a knife drawn across silk. Slith, the Tenari stalker, stepped into the circle. Her voice was a cold whisper in the translator's grid, but it cut through the room with surgical precision. "You expect us to believe a mere trainer," she said, her slitted eyes gleaming, "exceeds the physical output of designated elite warrior castes?" Cade met her stare without flinching, his voice steady. "I expect you to believe your own eyes." He paused for emphasis, letting the tension thicken before continuing. "Human history? Mostly just a long, bloody exercise in surviving impossible situations and figuring out new ways to kill each other. Personally, I've fought in 2 full-scale wars, at least 2 dozen minor ones, and spent 35 years turning soft civilians into people who could crawl through fire and like it. You don't get through that without learning how to suffer. The alien group stirred. Quiet murmurs buzzed through translators, the unsettling realization starting to sink in. Darn approached from the side, his armored steps more hesitant this time. Fry's blinked slowly, thoughtful. What kind of conflict requires such extremity, he asked, clearly curious rather than skeptical. Cade leaned back slightly, considering the question. Every kind. We fought in jungles so dense, you can't see your own boots. Deserts hot enough to boil your eyes. Urban ruins, trench warfare, chemical zones. Closed quarters with blades and fists. These days, we send kids out with drone swarms and satellite cannons. But the basics haven't changed. He took another drink, letting the silence return. Then he added with a hint of dark humor, our infantry pipeline's designed to break recruits long before they reach a battlefield. Compared to that, this? He gestured toward the earlier gauntlet. This is a brisk walk in the park. By afternoon, the next set of trials began, the combat efficiency evaluation. It was a mix of range weapons trials, tactical maneuvers, and target discrimination drills. Alien weapons, human tactics. For Cade, anything that fired projectile felt like home turf. He'd picked up a crystalline plasma rifle the instructor had been describing in scientific gibberish. The stock felt weird, but the shape was familiar enough. Just another fancy rifle, Cade muttered. His first few shots were sloppy, wide misses, but within seconds he'd recalibrated, shifting posture and adjusting for recoil. Breath in, hold, trigger squeeze. The next 3 shots cut a laser-tight line to the target center. Elvon watched from a nearby control platform, quietly logging results. Impressive recalibration. Most participants require extended training with unfamiliar weapons. Kay didn't look away from the target. A gun's a gun, he said. Just have to figure out how it talks. Then came the close quarters assessment, where things got more interesting. They'd paired him with another Vrax warrior. Not Growlithe, but the same general size and temperament, which meant angry, enormous, and used to winning by default. From the start, it was clear Cade was outmatched in size. His alien opponent towered over him. Thick-limbed, armored with flesh like dense rubber, and blessed with a reach that could pluck birds from trees. The Pell referee began outlining the sparring rules in that droning, clinical voice, but Cade wasn't listening. He was watching. The Groth fighter was strong, no doubt, but he moved like a walking tank. Predictable arcs, sluggish recovery, and there was a guarded motion every time he pivoted to the left. Old wound, maybe. Weak spot for sure. When the match began, the Groth did exactly what Cade expected. Bellowed and charged like a wrecking ball, looking for something to smash. Cade didn't resist. He sidestepped at the last moment, redirected the alien's mass with shoulder drop, and hammered an open palm straight into the injured flank. The Groth slammed into the mat hard, winded and stunned. Crude technique, the Pell instructor said flatly, disapproving Eyestalk's twitching. Cade reached down and helped the alien up without missing a beat. Dead is dead. Pretty moves don't matter if you're bleeding out. He demonstrated the maneuver again in slow motion, adjusting posture and angles to match alien physiology. See? Same concept works on humans. Simple mechanics. Effective results. The instructor remained unimpressed, but the audience of other competitors leaned in closer, watching now with growing curiosity. That evening brought a more cerebral challenge, a tactical simulation. Holographic scenarios floated in midair, battlefield puzzles from jungle ambushes to orbital siege. The evaluators clearly wanted sophisticated solutions. Quantum arrays, tactical drone clouds, gravitic suppressors. Cade ignored most of the tools. His strategy? Basic, brutal clarity. Secure elevation, interlock lines of fire. Keep squads tight. Focus fire on pressure points. This is rudimentary, one of the Pell reviewers commented, staring at Cade's plan for urban conflict. It's also realistic, Cade replied, not looking up. Your fancy gears grade until the first comms outage, or when half your team's screaming for a medic. Surely, another alien began with beam weaponry and environmental dominance. The rules change? Cade cut in. They don't. Tech evolves. Combat doesn't. You want Earth's view? Here it is. Keep it simple. Master the basics. And assume nothing will go as planned. Across the room, other participants were building grandiose stratagems, multi-wave pincer attacks, phasing transport corridors, nanite-driven distractions. Cade watched unimpressed. Merle floated closer, eyeing his furrowed brow. Is there an issue, Staff Sergeant? Half of these plans collapse the moment something unpredictable happens, Cade muttered. Or when their squad lead gets vaporized. Or when their flank turns into a meat grinder. You anticipate failure? I plan for it, he replied, eyes locked with Merle's. That's how you outlive your own tactics. The second day opened with another trial, this time pure endurance. Competitors strapped into heavy packs and began a forced march across uneven terrain. The environment's gravity cranked steadily upward, simulating twice Earth's pull. The Pell had done the math, supposedly calibrating load limits to each species. Cade wasn't so sure. You call this heavy? He grunted, adjusting the straps as the weight bit into his shoulders. I carried more emotional baggage out of my first marriage. Several aliens didn't last an hour. Their joints faltered, muscles seized. Even the hardy species stumbled under the gravitational burden. Those that remained trudged forward with quiet desperation. Cade did what he always did, locked into rhythm, breath by breath, step by step, one foot planted, then the next. To distract himself from the gnawing fatigue, Cade started singing low, steady, rhythmic. It's a 130. Boots hit the dirt. 64 souls a mission that'll hurt. The cadence rolled out like a slow drumbeat, syncing perfectly with each trudging step. A few aliens glanced over, confused by the strange ritual, but Cade kept going, voice steady despite the strain. Destinations classified, route unknown. We don't know if we're ever coming home. The third hour crept by, and the field had thinned dramatically. Less than half of the original competitors were still upright. Most had collapsed under the pressure, literally, panting and limping beside him. Darn finally asked, "What is this vocal ritual? Some form of spell?" Cade chuckled between lines. Keeps your brain busy. Distracts from the burn. Builds rhythm. Builds unity. Darn grunted, intrigued. A psychological defense mechanism. Impressive. You want to give it a try? Cade offered. The alien nodded, then gave it a go, repeating one of Cade's lines, his gravelly, multi-tone voice, run through a translator filter that butchered the rhythm entirely. The result was so atrociously offbeat that Cade burst out laughing. Genuinely, for the first time since he'd set foot on the alien station. They pushed on. By the end of the course, only 8 remained. Cade, Darn, Slith, and even the hulking Groth Kerrigan were still standing. The rest lay scattered along the route, either disqualified by medical bots or passed out from overexertion. Merle met Cade at the finish, eyes twitching wildly as he reviewed the latest bio readings. "How are you still mobile?" the Pell administrator asked, genuinely baffled. "You're exhibiting signs of severe muscular degradation, cardiovascular strain, and core temperature elevation beyond human norms." Cade grabbed a hydration pouch, bit open, and downed the entire thing in one go. "Because we're not done. And you don't stop until the mission is." "Even at risk of bodily collapse?" Merle asked, visibly disturbed. "Especially then," Cade replied, stretching arms and back, his joints crackling like old firewood. "That's what training is for. To break the illusion that your body decides when to quit." Later that afternoon came a test that didn't go in his favor. The Underwater Ops module. Species designed for aquatic environments, surged through the challenge with elegance. Cade? He swam like a stone on a tight budget. He wasn't fast. He wasn't fluid. But he was efficient. Every movement was deliberate, controlled, He rationed oxygen like it was gold, prioritizing survival over speed. When he finally surfaced, gasping, soaked, and several places behind the frontrunners, one Pell observer actually seemed pleased. "Your results were adequate," the creature intoned, the word feeling almost like a compliment from them. Cade peeled off his mask, water still running for his uniform. "Can't win 'em all," he muttered. "This ain't my playground." "You are not disappointed?" the Pell asked, apparently thrown off by Cade's lack of frustration. "Knowing what you can't do is just as important as knowing what you can," Cade said, towel drying his head. "In a real op, I'd send someone better suited, or I'd find another way." The instructors didn't know what to make of that. They were used to prideful competitors hiding their flaws. But Cade wasn't bothered. He'd spent a lifetime learning that owning your limitations wasn't weakness. It was strategy. Of all the trials so far, it wasn't the gunfire, gravity, or noxious air that truly unnerved the Pell evaluators. It was what came next. As the artificial lights of the station's simulated day dimmed, the assessment entered its most insidious phase. Sleep deprivation. Gone were the quiet dorms. The rest area was transformed into a psychological minefield. Panels on the walls erupted in blinding flashes at random intervals. Sirens wailed in dissonant loops. Static burst from hidden speakers like ghost screams, shattering any hope of silence. Every time someone started to drift off, their wristbands delivered subtle electric jolts, sharp enough to spike adrenaline, but not quite enough to trigger full panic. Sleep wasn't just a scourge, it was forbidden. In the chaos, glowing terminals flickered to life, spewing endless cognitive puzzles, logic chains, abstract pattern matches, shifting battlefield simulations, all of it designed to break down attention, slow decision-making, and unravel thought. It worked. Kerrigan, usually volcanic with energy, slumped, fists clenched in frustration instead of fury. Slither's elegant fluidity deteriorated into robotic stiffness, eyes bloodshot and movements delayed. Darn struggled just to stay coherent, his translator sputtering nonsense as his mental focus crumbled. Across the room, cognitive scores were plummeting. Reflexes dulled. Tempers rose. Incoherent muttering in alien tongues replaced once confident declarations. The center was beginning to crack. And then there was Cade. While others were crashing, he was rising. A second wind hit, like jet fuel. He didn't sit, didn't slump. He paced. Sharp-eyed, energized, smirking like a man in his element. He wasn't just surviving the madness. He owned it. "Let me tell you about this one time in Zaire. 3 days on foot, no food, radio shot of hell. And this shiny new lieutenant thinks the field manual's going to conjure us up a cheeseburger." His voice carried through the noise like a war drum. At first, the others ignored him. Then, in their exhaustion, they started listening. So the idiot opens a manual to Section 8 and starts reading out loud, right there in a swamp that smells like fermented goat farts. Sergeant Major looks at him, rips out page 47, and lights it on fire to cook a frog we found. Best damn meal of the week. Cade slapped his thigh and laughed. The sound harsh but real. Raw. Alive. Darn blinked. Struggling to understand. How are you still alert? He rasped through a glitching translator. His composure was gone. Only survival instinct remained. Cade leaned down, a half-grin tugging at the corner of his mouth. "Ranger school, brother. 61 days. You're lucky to get 3 hours of sleep a night. And that's on a good day. Quitting gets trained right out of you." He paused, glanced at the flickering lights, and added with a chuckle, "Compared to that, this is a luxury resort. You want to hear about the time we navigated out of Panamanian jungle using a broken compass and a can of Spam?" Behind the one-way observation glass, Pell officials huddled around data screens, frowning. Monitors flashed red as they reviewed biofeedback. The protocols were working on the others, but not on him. Rollins, Cade, should have been crashing. Instead, he was rallying. Their finely tuned algorithms had never accounted for a species whose resilience wasn't biological. It was psychological, cultural, forged in 1,000 years of war and misery, and wrapped in gallows humor. The scientists looked on, some fascinated, others quietly unnerved. Their simulation was breaking, but not the human. Whatever data the aliens were collecting, it wasn't lining up with expectations. Not even close. Cade wasn't just holding out, he was thriving. The more the station threw at him, the more animated he became. Exhaustion didn't wear him down. It lit a fire. Behind mirrored glass, Administrator MYRLL stared at the data readouts with a mixture of disbelief and genuine discomfort. Based on baseline projections, humans should show cognitive degradation after 18 hours without rest, he muttered, running his fingers over the sensor display. This individual's neural resilience exceeds every known species threshold. Cade noticed the anxious murmuring. He just grinned and pointed toward the drink dispenser. This is me without coffee. Y'all haven't seen anything yet. Day 3 arrived like a punch in the face. The final trial before combat, psychological warfare. The participants were sealed into isolation pods, black, soundless chambers that didn't just contain the mind. They pressed against it. What played inside was custom-designed torment, hallucinations, echoes of trauma, every sound and image drawn from their deepest fears. For Cade, the AI simulation team had pulled from human military records, recordings of urban firefights, screaming wounded, detonations in enclosed spaces. Flashbang bursts and distorted cries mimic real events. Friends dying in Kashmir, civilians in crossfire, the gut-wrenching moment of not knowing who lived and who didn't. But the Pell had misunderstood something fundamental. This wasn't new to him. Cade didn't relive his trauma. He confronted it, using the same methods he drilled into thousands of recruits over decades. Breath discipline, mental silos, focusing on controllables, anchoring himself in the present. Painful? Of course. But fear only has power when you run from it. For hours later, the pod doors hissed open. Cade stepped out slowly. His face was tight, shadowed, but his eyes? Clear, focused. Would you like to debrief? Asked the Pell psychologist, scanning his vitals. Your stress biomarkers are substantial. Cade didn't flinch. I'd like to tell you where to file your science experiment, he said, voice flat. The alien's posture shifted uneasily. The simulation was designed to evaluate your psychological threshold. Oh, I know what you're trying to do. Cade snapped, his stare cutting deep. But if you want to break someone, you'd better understand what they actually fear. You think I run from my memories? I carry them. The Pell fell silent, clearly unprepared for that answer. Only 4 remained. Cade, Kerrigan, Slith, and, unexpectedly, darn, the armored Tookery had weathered every stage with surprising adaptability. Quiet, observant, steady. The final round would test them alone. No allies, no mercy. A live simulation combat zone filled with smart drones, tactical adaptation, and variable objectives. Each warrior would face their own version of the gauntlet. Cade watched his rivals go in one by one. Kerrigan thundered through like a berserker, smashing targets with brute force. It worked, until the drones adapted, shifting tactics and flanking him into submission. Slith flowed like a shadow, relying on stealth and precision. He lasted longer, until the AI turned erratic, breaking his patterns and forcing him into the open. Darn used balance. Defense, positioning, measured strikes. Smart. But when the scenario escalated past conventional tactics, even he folded under the pressure. Then it was Cade's turn. Only this time, the rules had changed. He noticed a difference immediately. More enemies, smarter reactions, tighter time limits. It was no longer a test of competence. It was targeted failure. They trying to break me? He muttered, staring down Administrator MYRLL. Cute. My old drill sergeant had bigger fangs, and he was missing half his teeth. The door sealed shut behind him. The countdown hit 0. Cade stood still. Then, simulated gunfire exploded all around. Opponents surged in from every angle. Chaos in every direction. But Cade didn't flinch. He didn't run. He read the storm and prepared to meet it on his terms. Cade hit the ground hard, slipping into cover like he'd been born to it. Every movement was deliberate. Precise shots, short bursts, not a single bullet wasted. Conserve ammo. Check your angles. Own the moment, he murmured to himself, defaulting to reflexes carved into him over a lifetime. But the simulation wasn't playing fair anymore. Behind mirrored glass, frustrated Pell operators began tweaking the scenario, throwing in environmental traps, malfunctioning equipment, even simulated civilians in the crossfire. Anything to throw him off. Cade didn't blink. When standard tactics failed, he shifted. When shifting didn't work, he adapted. He used debris for cover, triggered traps to neutralize clusters, even feigned defeat, luring hostiles into kill zones. What he lacked in firepower, he made up for in raw cunning and grit. The sim hadn't been designed to counter creativity born from chaos. After 3 punishing hours, the last enemy fell. Cade stood alone at the center of the holographic battlefield, breathing hard, body soaked in sweat, but still on his feet. Around him, the simulation dissolved, leaving only stunned Pell engineers staring through the glass. "That it?" Cade asked, casually wiping his brow like he'd just wrapped up target practice. The final med scan was telling. Elevated cortisol, torn muscle fibers, dehydration, even with supplements. His body was battered, yet his vitals, stable. "You remain operational," the attending Pell doctor said, voice tinged with something close to accusation. "Told you," Cade muttered, rolling his shoulder. That was just a warm-up. When the final evaluation was called, the remaining participants gathered. Cade, Kerrigan, Slith, and Dorn all showed signs of wear. Strain hung off them like heat shimmer. Administrator MYRLL stepped forward, voice amplified through chamber. "The 72-hour evaluation is now concluded. All surviving candidates are to be recognized for their perseverance." Cade scanned the others. Kerrigan swaying on his feet, but defiant. Slith pale and still. Dorn smiling faintly in that way only Tookery could. He turned back to MYRLL. "That's it? When do we start the real test?" Silence. Even the translators seemed to stall, uncertain they'd interpret him correctly. This was the final phase. MYRLL said at last, struggling to maintain composure. "You just completed it. On the highest difficulty settings." Cade raised an eyebrow. "Huh. Felt like an easy week back in basic." A ripple of disbelief swept the chamber. Kerrigan, despite clear exhaustion, growled with reluctant respect. Slither's sharp eyes narrowed, now laced with something that looked suspiciously like dread. Dorn exhaled deeply, as if watching something legendary unfold. Behind the glass, the Pell administrators erupted into hushed debate. Their translator modules went offline as they gestured frantically at the data feeds, arguing in their native clicks and pulses. Finally, MYRLL returned, this time flanked by another Pell, draped in ceremonial garments and radiating authority. Staff Sergeant Rollins, MYRLL said, voice formal now. "This is High Administrator Domitus of the Galactic Defense Force." Cade stood a bit straighter, nodding out of habit. "Sir." Domitus offered a slight bow and activated a hologram beside them. The display lit up, Rollins' stats plotted against every other species. His numbers soared off the charts. "Your performance," Domitus said, "has shattered every existing benchmark." The room was silent, all eyes, alien and otherwise, on Rollins as Domitus gestured the results, still glowing on the display. "According to our xenophysiologist," he said slowly, "you should have reached terminal fatigue during the second cycle." Rollins cracked a grin. "With all due respect, sir, your xenophysiologists don't know jack about humans." Domitus blinked, unreadable. "So it would appear." He leaned forward. "Staff Sergeant, we must ask plainly. Are you truly an average example of your species' military forces? Our request explicitly specified baseline personnel, not elite operatives." That did it. Rollins barked out a laugh. deep, genuine, echoing off the polished walls like a cannon shot. It took him a moment to collect himself. "I'm a drill instructor," he said at last, wiping his eye, practically a desk jockey at this point. "I spend my days teaching kids how to become soldiers, not storming trenches myself." "That is impossible," Merle interjected. I stalks trembling. Rollins raised a brow. "What I did, any one of my graduates could pull it off. Hell, some of them do it better." He paused, eyes scanning the stunned faces. "You want impressive? Go find a Ranger, or a Navy SEAL, or one of our Delta boys. They'd eat this program alive." A silence fell over the room, an instinctual hush that crossed every species line. Expressions of growing alarm spread across the Pell like a virus. "You are implying," Domitus said carefully, "that your forces contain entire units whose capabilities exceed your own?" Rollins pointed to his graying temple. "I'm old, sir. By military standards, I've got more years than speed left. But the ones still out there? They're faster, smarter, trained on bleeding-edge doctrine. I'm just experienced with knees that pop when I sit down." Domitus exhaled, voice hushed. "This complicates matters." The final council session took place in a different part of the station, high clearance, high ceiling, and full of importance. A dozen different species stood in semicircle around a massive holographic table, the chamber alive with soft light and shifting star maps. Rollins stood at parade rest, chin level, heart steady. He'd done what they asked, shown them what an average human soldier, tired, aging, and long off the front line, could still accomplish. Now it was time to hear what came next. High Administrator Prell addressed the room, voice amplified and sharp with formality. Based on the results of the assessment, he began, and the subsequent data analysis. The hologram behind him shifted to charts, numbers, and glowing biometric lines. The Galactic Defense Force High Command has reached a unanimous decision regarding Earth's potential contribution to our combined security framework. Rollins didn't blink. He stood in practiced stillness, waiting. Prell continued, blunt now. The performance metrics demonstrated by Staff Sergeant Rollins, representing baseline human military readiness, indicate significant deficiencies in existing GDF training protocols. Gasps, muted reactions. Some eyes narrowed in frustration, others widened in realization. Therefore, Prell said, turning toward Rollins, Earth is hereby invited to assume a leading role in the redesign of our joint training regimen, to implement more effective, rigorous, and resilient combat preparation across the entire Galactic Defense Force. He nodded with rare solemnity. "And we would like to offer you, Staff Sergeant Rollins, the position of Chief Training Advisor, to oversee this restructuring in full." Rollins blinked. Of all the outcomes he considered, a commendation, maybe a diplomatic nod, and a ride back to retirement, this hadn't even made the list. Chief Training Advisor for the entire galaxy's defense force. He thought of the pampered recruits who flinched at dirty boots, of the aliens who'd never once trained for failure, of the universal arrogance in underestimating grit. And then, slowly, a smile spread across his face. "Sir," he said, "where do I start?" 6 months later, Staff Sergeant William Rollins, now officially Chief Training Advisor Rollins, stood in front of first class of the newly restructured Galactic Defense Force Academy. 40 recruits, 12 different species, all of them nervous. Rumors had already spread of the human methods, the human standards, and most terrifying of all, the human drill sergeant who had broken the GDF assessment like it was a morning jog. Rollins stood still, boots planted like roots in steel, eyes scanning each face with precision of man who'd seen every version of fear, arrogance, and raw potential across decades. Some tried to meet his gaze. Most couldn't. He took a long breath, the weight of it settling across his shoulders. Not the burden of duty, but the satisfaction of it. This was where he belonged. Not fading into retirement. Not fishing on some quiet lake. But here, where real warriors were forged. He started pacing slowly, voice rising just enough to cut through the silence like a blade through soft armor. Some of you think you're strong. That's cute. You've trained in perfect gravity, slept in clean beds, eaten food prepared by machines. Out here, that means exactly nothing. He turned sharply. You want to survive on the real battlefield? You want to protect this fragile galaxy with its politics and peace treaties and polished uniforms? Then you better earn it. Because the next war won't be won with advanced tech or fancy tactics. It'll be won by the one thing none of your species ever bothered to train for: grit. Silence. Then a low hum of tension filled the room. He could feel it, the challenge in the air. And he welcomed it. This academy is going to hurt. It's supposed to. It's not about breaking you. It's about revealing the part of you that doesn't break. He stopped in front of a nervous-looking Tenari recruit whose hands were trembling. Rollins bent slightly, his voice low but firm. And if you make it to my course, you won't just be a soldier. You'll be the reason the planet survives. You'll be the one others look to when everything else falls apart. He stood up straight again. Now, drop and give me 20. You got 10 seconds to impress me. A moment of stunned hesitation. Then, a clatter of movement. Dozens of limbs hit the floor in every imaginable shape and configuration. And in that moment, as Rollins watched species once divided by biology, culture, and arrogance move in sync under a single voice, he smiled. Just a little, because the real war hadn't started yet. But for the first time in a long time, the galaxy might actually be ready. Staff Sergeant William Rollins stood before the formation, shoulders squared, boots planted in red Martian dust, or whatever equivalent the strange station had managed to simulate. Behind him stood the cadre, his cadre, hand-picked warriors from half a dozen worlds. Veterans, not theorists. Fighters, not diplomats. Before him, the next generation. 40 recruits, 12 species, all staring at him with a mix of pride, fear, and just enough arrogance to make this interesting. Rollins didn't need a translator. Welcome to the first day of the rest of your lives, he said, voice like gravel over steel. You think you're tough. You think you're ready. You're not. He stopped in front of a young Groth recruit, tall, thick-armed, with defiant jawline that reminded Rollins of Kierman, probably a cousin. This galaxy's full of things that'll eat you alive while your fancy tech tries to calculate its next move. My job? Making sure you don't die screaming the first time you meet one. His boots thudded on the packed ground as he paced. Starting today, you will train harder than you ever imagined. You will ache. You will bleed. You will wish you'd never been born. But if you survive what's coming, you won't just be soldiers. You'll be legends. He let the words settle. The silence that followed was electric. Then, that was a welcome speech. He turned on his heel. Now the real training begins. His command snapped through the air like a whip. Recruits scrambled, tentacles, claws, hooves, boots, into the mud-slick obstacle course modeled after Earth's infamous Fort Benning. Screams and curses filled the air, garbled through universal translators. Rollins watched them go, lips curling into a smile. This wasn't the retirement he'd planned, but it was the one that mattered. Because deep down, he'd always known, warfare wasn't about who had the brightest lasers or fastest ships. It was about who could suffer, adapt, endure, and come back swinging. And now the galaxy was about to learn what humanity had learned the hard way. True toughness isn't grown in a lab. It's earned in the mud. Rollins crossed his arms, barking over chaos. Move it, maggots. My grandmother moved faster, and she's been dead 30 years. A stunned Trinari tripped headfirst into a trench. A Groth yelped as they hit electrified wire. And Rollins just nodded, satisfied. Some things were universal after all. If you made it this far, you now know what happens when the galaxy underestimates a human soldier. If you enjoyed the ride, like, comment, and subscribe for more epic stories where humanity refuses to back down. And tell us, what would you do if the universe made you its last line of defense?